Hello lovely people, I'm sorry this is so late. It's 3:15 on Monday here in the UK on the Step by Step Listening page, and today's subject is peace, inner peace, how to get it. So a really gorgeous welcome. It's an interesting thing because I was just speaking to somebody that has had a really tough time, and she has now made the decision about what she's going to do. And I tend to get involved with people, should I stay or should I go? Whether it's in their relationship or staying in their business, it's kind of they're on that fence, and it seems like a simple decision, but actually we know it's complex. There's lots of parts, lots of moving parts, lots of people impacted by it. So one of the ways to get peace is to actually make a decision. I don't think it takes too much of a scientist for you. If you remember, when you're stuck in indecision, angst you kind of got loads of stuff going on inside of you, and once you've made the decision, that's it. But how do you make decisions? That's the thing I'd ask you to think. Where you get your peace from is understanding where your decision-making process comes from. Now, having worked with hundreds and hundreds of people, what I discovered is that for some people, it simply is time and space to think. If they're external processors, then it's really useful for them to have a coach or someone to talk to, and they bounce the ideas around. And what happens in that exchange is that we say something, somebody else says something back. Either they really listen and they repeat back exactly what we say, or they repeat back what they think, or they repeat back their experiences, or they repeat back what they think they've understood we've said. And that process means that we get to say what we're thinking, somebody else says something, there's a response outside, and we get a reaction inside. And usually if we've said something and they've kind of summarised it and it's not quite how we wanted it, it can give us a real strong feeling inside that actually that's not what I want, that's not what I meant. And so I spent years and years and years being annoyed and frustrated because people weren't listening, that they were misunderstanding me, that I wasn't being heard. And what I've discovered is that actually every time somebody says something that kind of doesn't sit right, or it doesn't feel like what I was saying, it's giving me a signal, it's giving me a way of tuning in and actually finding out what do I actually want. So have a think about that for your decision-making process. How do you make decisions? So most people that I know, they need time to think about it. Okay, and what most people are not doing is giving themselves enough time. The minute that you have got time to yourself, you're either out there helping other people, or you're on social media, or you're reading something, and you're filling your head. And so the best and quickest and easiest way to get peace right now is just to sit and be. And so for this Monday afternoon video, my invitation is for you to take a moment right now as you watch this video. Just give yourself a few seconds, if you would last 30 seconds in silence, and just check in with yourself. And just notice what's happening inside and outside of your head. What's happening inside and outside around your heart? What's happening inside and outside your gut? What's happening inside and outside your soul? And breathe. And what is your body telling you right now? What would head like to have happen? What would heart like to have happen? What would gut like to have happen? What would soul like to have happen? And what would body like to have happen? So having done this for years, what I've discovered is that is what most people need. Some time to think, some questions to ask themselves, some time to reflect, to ponder their answers, and then some of them answers. Some of those they might want to speak out with somebody and have it reflected back so they can kind of try it on, so they can calibrate it. So there's this feeling they get inside once they've shared it. But what I discovered over the years, having done this for 30 odd years, been motivating and managing other people to create change in their life, as I discovered that some people would talk it out with me and they'd get absolute clarity. They'd come in all frazzled and their head like spaghetti, and they'd leave with clarity, like the cloud had been lifted, their shoulders were back, they'd feel lighter, they'd have the peace, and then they'd leave and it would all implode again. And what happened over the years when we started modelling, what was the difference that made the difference? What was the difference between the people that had absolute clarity, who left the session and went off and actually took action and confidence grew and change happened? There was two major things. Now, the first thing was that the people who had clarity of what they wanted and acted on it often knew themselves better. And therefore, when asked the question, what would you like to have happen? Or what would head like to have happen? Or body? They knew themselves well enough. They were used to listening to themselves. They knew who they were. They knew what mattered to them. They knew their core values. They knew what was important. They knew how they learned. They knew how they processed information. They knew how they listened best. They knew how they worked best. They knew how they wanted to live. So when asked a question as simple as, what would you like to have happen? It was made based on a really solid foundation of an essence of knowing who they were. And so when they made the decision, it was inclusive of everything that they knew about themselves. So if you're struggling to make a decision and you're struggling to find peace, sometimes what happens, we're out there searching for the answer and we make a decision, we get temporary relief because we've made a decision so we can do something. But then we end up back in that spiral. So you might need to step back a bit and actually think about getting to know yourself. And one of the things that I do with my clients is actually say, look at working, learning and living your models. But you could decide to, for you, peace is like what? Where does your peace come from? What kind of peace is that? You can start asking questions to get to know who you are. So the people who actually acted on their decisions were often people who knew themselves well enough. So when they made a decision, it was naturally inclusive of their needs and their wants to work, learn and live at their best, both independently with other people. The other people, the people who knew what they wanted and they knew themselves well, then the other people that still didn't seem to do it were people who were very sensitive to the feedback of other people. And so they would leave all very excited, they'd know what they want, it absolutely know what they want it, and it wouldn't matter how many times they came back to me, that what they wanted and what worked for them never changed. But what did change is when they spoke to somebody about something, if they didn't get the response that they wanted or needed to affirm and give them recognition that their decision was right in the eyes of other people, they would easily lose confidence in the decision and themselves, and so they wouldn't act on it. And it could be as simple as they tell a friend or a family member or a colleague at work, and the person simply doesn't respond, or they go, oh, or they They may not actually say anything. And that the not saying anything is interpreted as they don't like it, they think is a bad idea. And that's when I've really had to start working with my clients and myself to change the way that we listen to the reaction and response of other people, because so many people don't understand how listening works, that often we've started chatting with the purpose of sharing our dream, our vision, our decision, but we haven't told the other person that we're just about to start talking. So they're half away in their own thoughts, they've got stuff going on, and so they realise you're talking to them. They catch half the conversation, they then get their thinking brain in place to start trying to listen to you, which means they probably pull a face. And then you make up all sorts of stories about what means. And when I was on my journey, because this was something I used to do a lot, I didn't know myself very well, so I'd ask for what I wanted, and then when we unpacked it, really it wasn't what I really wanted, it's what I thought would make everybody else happy. And then, when I started looking at what made me happy, I didn't know what that was, so I had to do all that work to find out who I was, what did I want, what brought me joy. But ultimately, the thing that would stop me from taking action, stop me from doing the things that I really wanted to do, was because I would react or respond to the feedback of other people. And when I first discovered that's what I was doing, when I started paying attention to, so when you leave and you've got a really good idea and you tell somebody, if you find yourself go, oh, like that, the chances are you then backtrack, you lose that inner peace, you lose that sense of clarity, you lose that confidence because something's happened. And so be listening to the story, notice what's happening inside, and notice what happened just before that happened. What was it you heard and saw? What was it, the response you got that's causing this reaction now in you? And for me, it was nose crunching. And so I would tell people that I'm going to just notice over the next couple of weeks that if I have a reaction inside, I've noticed I've got this pattern that if people scrunch their nose up, I kind of make a story up that they don't like something I've said. And it might be true, maybe you don't like something I've said, but is it okay if I ask you about it? And so I started asking people, I was having a conversation and they'd scrunch their nose up, and I say, I've just noticed that I've said this and what I've seen you do is like that, and I'm making up a story about it, that something I've said isn't right or whatever. Can I just check what's happening for you? And they were like, I have no idea why I scrunched my nose up, or I have no idea. No, it wasn't really what you said. And what I discovered is the three that stand out that I remember really clearly. One was that I'd used a word they hadn't heard for a long time, and it reminded them of their dad who passed away. And so they went like that, and that was just their thinking face. Another person, it was they wanted to listen, but their stomach was really hurting and they had wind and they were like feeling a bit uncomfortable. And so they were trying to sort of suppress that in order to give me their attention. And it just wasn't the right time. They were a bit uncomfortable for them to actually listen. And another person hadn't actually heard what I'd said. And so that look was nothing to do with me. I just hadn't engaged them. So if you want peace, ultimately you have to have clarity of what you want. You have to have confidence in who you are as a person. You have to know yourself well, so that when you're making decisions, you're able to calibrate and make this decision inclusive of your needs. And then lastly, you have to be able to change the way that you listen and react to the response that you get from you being you. Because when you can start to be curious about other people's responses, you can listen to their responses without judgment, from a place of curiosity, that is when you get true peace inside. Now, that doesn't mean people don't push my buttons anymore. It doesn't mean that I don't have things to consider. But what it does mean is I've got the tools and resources now in order to reset that system. So if I'm feeling stressed, or I'm feeling agitated by some feedback I've had, or the reaction or the response, I can simply sit with that for a moment, can notice what's happening, check whether this is a pattern, does it happen before, and then start to be curious about it, and then go back through the clarity process. Say, what would I like to have happen? How do I need to be? And if it is a change of behaviour on my part, what kind of resource support might I need? And in my case, it was a case of asking some friends and family members, do you mind me asking you some questions about it if it comes up? Because I need to sort of debunk and unravel what it is that's truly holding me back. And when I started to realise the story I was making up in my head around their nose scrunching was completely fairy tale land, it was not true at all, it actually started reducing how sensitive I was to the odd nose scrunching. So I just wanted to share that with you today. I hope that's useful. If you find the videos useful, please like, share, comment, and tell your friends about them. If you want to know more and you'd like to get some of the written work I send out, don't forget to check stepbystep.listening.com. In the top right hand corner, you've got the word newsletter. Please go there and sign up for Success Without Stress newsletter. I send out a What's Working newsletter every Wednesday, sharing with you my journey and the stuff that my clients and I are learning, all about how to get clarity and confidence to create and manage change in our lives. Have a fantastic week. Speak to you again soon.